Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today I'm using this new set by Pink Ink for Impression Obsession called Butterfly Kisses. I'm also using my Colorburst powders. Now there are several butterflies in the set, which is why I got it. And I'm going to use pretty much all of them and place them in my Misty on some Strathmore 90-pound watercolor paper. I'm going to ink them up with some Versamark ink. And then I'll sprinkle it with some embossing powder and heat it to set it so I can see where that set of butterflies is. And now I'm going to clean them thoroughly before I do this and then place them around the ones that I already did. So I have 6 more. I'm just randomly placing these so they sort of all fit together like a puzzle. And then I will put some embossing powder on those and heat it to set it. And now I've got another set that I've done, and I did it 3 or 4 times until I covered my whole piece of cardstock with a random set of butterflies. Now when I do my Colorburst powders, I like to moisten my paper first, not too wet, but definitely got some water on it. And now I'm going to drop my color. I always use way too much color just because I like there to be a lot of color, so there's a lot of extra and it gets wasted. But I figure I've used these so many times and they're, I don't think, anywhere near empty. So I'm just going to put a bunch on there, and my purple comes out in big chunks, which I kind of like because it's really thick when it dries and it becomes almost iridescent. So it's a really pretty look. So I'm just going to drop a bunch of dots of the purple, and now I'm going to take my water, and this is where it just looks gorgeous and it gets everywhere, all over my table, and for the next week, every time it gets wet, I see blue and purple. But anyway, it's worth it because it looks so pretty. So I'm going to spray a bunch of water on here, and you can see that there's really nothing to do. You just spray it. But of course, it's always fun to move the color around. So I always get a brush and sort of move it around a little bit. Maybe a little area didn't get it. It's probably better to even have some areas that don't have a lot of color just so you have some variation. But I like to make sure that all the different areas of the butterflies are colored in so that you can actually see all the image lines of each of the butterflies. Now, one of the other things I like to do is, since I put so much water on there, I like to pull up some of the water with a dry, mostly dry brush. So this one's a little bit moist, but I'm just holding it over the puddles of water so that it absorbs into my brush, and then I just wipe it off on a paper towel over here. And really, you could just leave this, but just to kind of make the drying go a lot quicker, I like to pull up some of the puddles. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm going to pick this up with my tweezers and place it on a piece of paper, which actually is too thin. It went right through the paper. So I put that on a paper towel on my craft table. My sentiment is from the Healing Hug set by Stampin' Up. So I'm going to stamp that on some white cardstock. I'm going to use my Simon Says Stamp Stitch Circles to cut that out. And now my panel is dry. It looks really beautiful. I didn't even wipe off the embossed areas. It just immediately resisted. Now I have some acrylic paint, so I'm going to put a little bit on my craft mat. I find that this is a pretty good way to get some white splatters. So I always use this flat brush here, and I try to start thick, so a lot more color and less water, but you get really small drops that way. So it's kind of a balance with how much water you use and how much paint you use, because the more paint you use, the thicker your splatters are going to be and the prettier and the brighter they are. So you can see I keep adding more and more water, so I slowly add the water until I'm finished with all my dots, so you can see how they look. And then I'm going to add some more later with a gel pen. I'm going to use some ribbon by Stampin' Up and also some linen thread. I'm going to first put some Scotch foam tape on the back of my sentiment and place it over this ribbon so the ribbon sticks behind it. So I'm just centering that ribbon behind my circle. And then I'll just measure enough to sort of wrap it around and cut it. Now I want to tie a bow with my linen thread, but I want it to scrunch up a certain way. So I want it to come up on both sides and also in the middle. So you can see that I was able to do that by just sort of fiddling with it a little bit. So it's up in the middle and up on either side. And so I'm going to take my linen thread, I just tie it once and it'll hold in place. And then I just tied a bow. I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. I got it my first try, amazingly enough. So once I get it kind of the loops the way I want, I'm just going to take my scissor and trim that off. Now there's a little kink, but you can pull it out with your fingernail and your finger really easily. So notice I did this before I adhered my white ribbon. So my ribbon was a little flexible while I put that twine on there. So I'm going to position my sentiment where I want it, just kind of hanging off my watercolor panel a little bit. And I had my base underneath there so I can kind of see where I was placing it. And then I'll put some tape runner on the underside of my watercolor panel and wrap my ribbon around and cut off the excess. And then I find that the watercolor pieces work much better, they adhere much better to the base if you use Tombow Mono-Multi Glue. I used to use ATG tape runner and it would still be a little wavy and kind of coming up in different areas, but with the Tombow glue it just sticks all over and it really doesn't seem warped at all. But I usually just put some blocks on it and let it dry for a few minutes and then it's perfectly flat. So one last thing I want to do is add a few more dots with the white gel pen, which really gives you really bright dots. Now if you touch it very lightly, you'll get a small dot, and then if you hold the pen on the paper for like a second or 2 seconds, you'll get a bigger one. So notice I've got my scratch paper to the left here, and I'm kind of using it to roll that pen to get the ink moving whenever I need to. And that's it. So that is the card for today. It was fun to use these Colorburst powders again. I love them, they're so beautiful. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.